Hello, and welcome to Scratch Paper, a writing-related podcast. I'm Alicia de los Reyes, and this is episode 5. So if this is your first time listening, thanks very much for trying it out, and I hope you enjoy the episode. If you are back, thanks for keeping up. So if you listened to the last episode, episode 4, I mentioned that I was going to give more ways to come up with ideas for a novel, so we're going to do that for the writing lesson today. In every podcast, I also give you an update on what I'm reading and what I'm writing, and I'm happy to report that I have something exciting that I've read over the weekend. I started the series, the Passing Bells trilogy, which maybe you've seen because they've just been reprinted and put out as part of kind of like a playing on the Downton Abbey popularity. So it says before there's Downton Abbey, there was Abingdon Priory. And it takes place, I guess, at the same time as Downton Abbey, which I have not watched yet. But at the turn of the century, World War I. So, excuse me, I read the first book called The Passing Bells, and I loved it. I devoured it. It's like a family epic about the Greville family, which is a count and countess and their kids. And it's really amazing to read about things that I learned in high school and see them from a more personal perspective, which is one reason I love historical fiction, because it actually makes history make sense to me and gives it some meaning instead of just being a list of random facts. But it's been quite some time since I read some historical fiction, and usually I don't pick up stuff about World War I or World War II. I like older eras, I guess, but I really, really enjoyed this book, and it was fascinating to me to see the transformation that all the characters went through. Because it showed how society changed so much in so short a time, from having all these counts and countesses and this very strict social rules to having many fewer rules in a much more egalitarian society. So I loved it, and I highly recommend it, especially if you like historical fiction. It was really long. It was 500 pages, but I devoured it, so it went by very quickly for me. For a writing update, I worked a bit over the weekend on my fun novel, which is about knitting and wool, and I am kind of, the way I'm writing it is I'm flipping between two places and two different characters. It's like my kind of cheater's way of breaking it up, so it's not just one big long story. And I did that just so I can work on it in kind of shorter bursts and not get too discouraged that I'm not done with a section yet. And it's still fun, though I started writing about a funeral and that got a little bit boring. I want it to be kind of a lighthearted novel, but I don't know, I feel like I'm getting a little bogged down at the beginning here. So that's my writing update. I also have a date to work on revising Finding Lucy, which I've been working on for a while now. Last time I mentioned that I had finished the first chapter. I haven't done anything else since then, but I will be working on it more, with any luck, knock on wood, tomorrow. Okay, so let's get into the lesson. So we're in kind of a series about writing a novel and getting started writing a novel. So the first episode in the series was episode 4. So if you want to go back and listen to that, you can. I gave you some ideas for how to come up with ideas for your novel based on place. And that was kind of, I felt, a little more ethereal way of thinking about novels, but I think it also kind of conveys how I think about ideas. Usually for me it's related to place, but you can get ideas for novels from in a lot of different ways. So I wanted to give you, I have 5 prompts here that could spark an idea for a novel. And after I give you these prompts, then next week I'll be talking about outlining and how to actually kind of flesh out your idea. So let me get into the prompts. So before I get started, I would just like to give some meta tips on how to handle prompts. So I always like to brainstorm with a pen and paper, because then I feel like I can just scribble out anything, and my handwriting is kind of messy, so I don't really worry about other people being able to read it. Also, I can just throw it away because it just looks like scratch paper. Oh, scratch paper, just like the name of this podcast. Like I said before, I think at the very beginning of this podcast, in episode 1, my favorite stage is the empty sheet of paper, so I really enjoy that part. But if you don't like brainstorming. You could also close your eyes and just kind of type a little bit on your computer. Maybe try writing out like the first paragraph to something that comes to you from one of these prompts. Or you could try talking it out with a friend. Maybe you have another writer friend and you guys want to bounce some ideas off each other, or maybe you want to work with somebody to write a novel. That could be really fun too. I have two friends who are working on a novel together, and it's really fun to read both of their writing. Another thing to mention is that you don't have to just pick one idea for each prompt. I think the best way to come up with an idea that you like and that is strong and that you'll stick with for a novel. Well, there's no guarantees that you'll stick with it, but I think stronger ideas come from writing down more ideas. So don't feel limited to just the first thing that pops into your brain. Maybe write it down and then just try and see if you can come up with another one, or maybe take a different angle on your original idea and just kind of keep thinking of different ways that you can answer these prompts, because then I think you really will hit on something that you love, and hopefully that will make you stick with it. So here are the prompts. The first one is actually a thing that you can buy. It's like a game called the Storymatic. My mother-in-law Jackie bought it for me. It was a really cool present, and it's a box full of cards. And so it's made by this teacher who teaches English, I think, at a high school in Vermont. And it's a really awesome idea. The cards are gold and red, and the gold cards are characters, and the red cards are kind of like events or things that would make it into a story. So what you do is you pick two random cards. So I'm going to pick two random gold cards, excuse me. So I have person with a grudge and fainter, as in someone who like faints, I guess. And so you could make those into two different people, but you could also use them to be one person, right? So it could be a fainter who has a grudge. And then I'm drawing one red card for the event that's going to start off the story, and it is historical recreation goes awry. So it's kind of a funny event. You could imagine a lot of different historical recreations, maybe a Civil War battle recreation going awry, and then a person faints, and then you find out they have a grudge. So I feel like this is not maybe the best venue for me to explain this, but I will put a link to it in the show notes. And it's a really cool idea. It's kind of like charades or celebrities, but like story and plot oriented. And it has a lot of good different ways to play with it in the instruction book that comes with it, and it's super fun. And I've also used it with a lot of my students when I was tutoring, and I had a couple students who really loved it, and we would come up with stories all the time, and that was really fun. So I highly recommend the Storymatic. It's just like a fun way to make up stories, and I would sometimes write along with my students, and it was just a blast to see how that was maybe 10 words that I read out loud there, and that was like plenty to fuel a whole, a story if you wanted to write one. And then if you get bored, you can always pick more cards. So highly recommend Storymatic. Okay, so now other prompts. So one way to write stories that a lot of people do successfully is to get inspiration from other movies or books. So this is called fan fiction, and it's a whole world. I have never written fan fiction, but it's when you take a character or an event in another person's story. So let's say Harry Potter. You take a character or a minor character or event, and then you kind of explore it or come up with give it more background, make it into a whole story of its own. I think you can also kind of make up alternative worlds for the characters in the story. But yeah, I'm not a fanfic expert, but a lot of actually famous stories have gotten written that way. So Jane Eyre is actually fan fiction for a Jane Austen novel, I believe. Now I'm blanking on which one, about a minor character named Jane. And then 50 Shades of Grey is fan fiction about the Twilight novels, and just with the characters' names changed. So that right there are two very famous novels that are, you know, essentially based in other stories, which is pretty cool. So yeah, I think that can be a fun way. If you have something that you really love, a story or a movie, you could try either making up an alternative ending and writing your own version of it. You could also try do what I mentioned before, take a minor character and explore their storyline more deeply. You could change the story in some small but significant way and then have the story take a different turn at some point. And excuse me, I think it's really fun, and also it might free you up from the pressure to kind of like write the great next American novel. Like this could be, or wherever you're from. It can just be fun to write stories, and then you could turn it into the next great American novel. But this is a way, I think fan fiction is a great way of like freeing up the pressure that we sometimes put on ourselves to write something like totally brand new, because maybe then you'll get, sometimes I think a tendency when you want to write something new is to realize, oh no, everything else has already been written and there is no such thing as anything new. Which in some ways is true. Every story has been told probably, but none of them have been told by you. So if you have trouble with that particular phobia, then maybe try fan fiction. Give yourself a break. Another kind of related prompt is to what if your life or someone else's. So what if your life? So like, let's say you just go to a point in your life or to a point in someone else's life and you ask the question, what if? And like, for example, what if something else had happened? So let's say you cross the street one day and you accidentally trip on a sidewalk and run into somebody. What if that person was actually your long lost adopted sister? Something like that. It doesn't have to be totally crazy, but it could be. And just see what kind of stories you come up with. So you could also what if something bigger like history. Like what if Germany had won World War One? What if the American Revolution had failed? What if, I don't know. But you can what if anything, and just kind of see what kind of characters would live in that space, what their problems would be, what they would think about what happened, what the world would be like. And yeah, another good prompt that I've heard of. Another way you could get inspiration, so now we're on prompt 4. Sorry, I have not been numbering these, but this is the 4th one. A story from childhood or the news, but you add the details. So I think this is what I used to try to do, is I always used to write down stories about my family, because I think my family's really interesting, because I have a really big family and they're from like a lot of different places, and I would like to hear about my parents' childhoods, which my dad's childhood was a lot different from mine. He grew up in a city, and his family had immigrated, so I loved hearing stories about his life. Also, my grandparents on both sides, their lives were far, far different from mine. My grandparents on my mother's side grew up in Pittsburgh and came from glass-working families, steel-working families, coal mining families, and essentially made their own way. And my grandparents on the other side lived in Cuba. So I loved hearing stories about all of them, and I would just write them down and try and like make up the details or create the characters, like younger versions of my grandma, for example. So yeah, I think that can be a fun way to write stories too. I read a really good book called Half-Broke Horses, which is by Jeanette Walls, who wrote The Glass Castle. I have not read The Glass Castle. I'm afraid to read that. But Half-Broke Horses is basically what I'm talking about, like a family novel. It's about her mother's mother, and her life, which is totally crazy, living in New Mexico a long time ago, and all the amazing things that she did. So yeah, stories from childhood, but let's say your family is really boring and or you're just not interested in them. You could also listen to the news, think of a story from the news or newspaper, I don't know, an essay you've read somewhere, and kind of create the backstory for those people, or even just take the characters, change their names, and make them into the main people in your novel. So you can do whatever you want because it's fiction. You don't have to stay true to the details. Yeah, and I think that can be another fun way to play with stories. The last prompt, this is the fifth one, is to ask, so I was trying to think of like other ways that I get at my story. And last time I talked about place, and another thing though that I think about a lot is character and what is it like to be a particular person. So, like for example, what is it like when I was living in New Hampshire, we would take these drives and we would go to these tiny, tiny towns, way up in the mountains. And I think I mentioned last time, I'm very nostalgic for New England. And when we were driving through there, we'd go through these tiny towns. And I would say, like, what is it like to be a person living here? You live so far from everything. I grew up in the suburbs, an hour from New York City. I was never far from anything. I was 5 minutes from the grocery store, 5 minutes from everywhere else. And in these places, you have to drive like 45 minutes to get to the grocery store, if there even is one 45 minutes away. And it's just such a fascinating place to me. So what is it like to be a particular person? Maybe a person that you know, that you've always been curious about. What is it like to be them? What is it like to be a person, like a servant in a really fancy mansion during World War I? That's kind of the question that gets answered in the book that I just read, The Passing Bells. So one of the questions, it's a really long book, like I said. So yeah, asking that question, what is it like to be a particular type of person or even a particular person that you know, can also maybe spark some stories. And you could brainstorm or just kind of imagine the ways that their life would play out and how they would react to different things, that changes or events in their lives. So I've given you 4 prompts and the suggestion of the Storymatic, which is a fun little game. And I don't have any like sponsorship from Storymatic or anything like that. Like I said, I got it as a gift, and I just really think it's cool. And before I gave you some ideas about place and how to get ideas from that, but I'd really like to hear how you come up with ideas for your novels. Like if you have this novel that you've been burning to write, where did you get the idea for it? How did you come up with it? Some people say like their ideas just landed in their head. Like J.K. Rowling says Harry Potter just dropped out of the sky while she was on the train. I was reading that book Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, and she said that she just dreamed a story once, also on the train. So maybe we should all try getting on the train for a little while. But I would love to hear how you come up with ideas for your stories. So I'll post the show notes on my website, and you can leave your methods or inspiration in the comments if you'd like to. My website is Alicia, Alicia, De Los Reyes, D as in dog, E, L as in llama, OSREYES.com. And the show notes will be there, and you can post in the comments. Would love to hear from you. So next week we'll be talking about how to outline, and I'm really looking forward to that because getting ideas is hard, but outlining is really fun for me. So tune in if you want to learn about outlining. If you don't like to outline, you can just start writing with your new brilliant ideas. And I hope you'll be back next week. Have a great week. Happy writing.